Hello learners, we are today going to discuss the topic of what should be the criteria to evaluate an environmental policy. We have seen in the previous lectures that there is a definite need of intervention whenever there is a provision of environmental goods for any purpose of economic activity. This happens because there are externalities associated with the supply and demand of environmental goods, which leads to a market failure. We've also talked about the various types of policy instruments which can be used by the government in order to correct the discrepancy. Today, we will be discussing what should be the criteria which should be used to evaluate an environmental policy so that it delivers the results for which it is intended to be designed. Let us first have a look at the objectives of today's lecture. First, we'll understand the types of criteria for environmental policy evaluation, and thereafter, we will see that how these criteria can ensure effective environment policy. As I just told you, that evaluation of environmental policies are essential to ensure that these policies are effective, equitable, and definitely sustainable. Each policy or each type of policy anticipates that administrators and polluters will respond in a particular way. And each type has specific characteristics that make it more likely to succeed in some circumstances and not in others. Therefore, there are various criteria which are used to evaluate these policies so that it achieves its objectives of efficiency, equity, and sustainability. Let us look at each of these criteria one by one. The first criteria that we will be discussing that is used for environment policy evaluation is efficiency. This is followed by cost effectiveness, though necessarily not in the same order. Fairness is another criteria, enforceability of the environmental policy, flexibility in the environmental policy, incentives for technological innovations, and moral considerations. So these are the 7 criteria that we are going to discuss, which are generally used to evaluate whether the environmental policy which has been designed or which is going to be designed is going to deliver its desired objectives or not. So learners, let us have a look at all these criteria one by one. We'll start with the first criteria, that is efficiency. What is efficiency? We all know efficiency in the context of environmental policy means maximum net benefits to the society. A policy which maximizes the net benefits to the society will involve efficiency. In terms of environmental policy, it involves the equality between marginal abatement cost and marginal damage. That is, whenever any activity is being taken, what is the marginal damage due to that activity and what is the cost which is attached to reduce that damage, which is called as marginal abatement cost. So the point of equality between both of these, we will call that an efficient environmental policy. An efficient environment policy, we say, is the one that moves us to or near the point where abatement cost and marginal cost are equal. So where the policy instruments are such that the marginal abatement cost and marginal damages become equal, we will say that this policy has achieved or it has passed the criteria of efficiency. Now, whenever we talk about efficiency while designing these environmental policy, the policy may be a centralized policy or it may be a decentralized policy. In a centralized policy, what happens is that it is the planners or the administrators who are at the forefront of designing these policies. So whatever environmental policies instruments are used, they are being made or they are being designed by a central team of administrator, and then this policy is given for implementation to the larger public. That is called as a centralized policy. A policy may be decentralized or a democratized policy, where what is going to happen is that it is people with consultation, maybe the people who are involved in the implementation of the policy, designing of the policy, and the people who are responsible for the environmental damage, they are included. Public sentiment is included, public opinion is included, and then this policy is designed. That policy is called as a decentralized policy. So, depending on the type of environmental damage situation, the policy may be a centralized policy or a decentralized policy. The second criteria that we have, which we use to evaluate an environmental policy, is cost effectiveness. What we know is that environmental damage many a times cannot be measured accurately, because we know many of the environmental goods or environmental services or natural inputs are non-marketable. So because they are non-marketable, it cannot be measured accurately all the times, even though we have a lot of environmental valuation techniques. Therefore, cost effectiveness becomes a very important policy criterion in evaluation of environmental policy. When will we call a policy cost effective? We say a policy is cost effective if it produces the maximum environmental improvement possible for the resources being depleted, or it achieves a given amount of environmental improvement at the least possible cost. So, there are two ways of understanding this cost effectiveness. One, we say the policy may be cost effective when it produces maximum environmental improvement for which it is designed. So, if a policy is able to achieve maximum environmental improvement which is possible for the resource which are being depleted, we might say that the policy is cost effective. That is, the benefit derived is maximized. Or on the other hand, cost effectiveness of the environmental policy may be also if the environmental improvement is achieved at the least possible cost. So, either way, whether it is by way of achieving environmental improvement, the given amount of environmental improvement in least possible cost, or it is about maximizing the environmental improvement, both will be a part of cost effectiveness of environmental policy. Now, what is cost effectiveness? As we have just seen, it refers to the assessment of whether an environmental policy achieves its desired outcomes at the lowest possible cost. So, in simple words, the cost incurred for the environmental improvement should be less than the benefits enjoyed by the society due to environmental improvement. That is, we are simply doing a type of a cost-benefit analysis of that policy and seeing to it that the benefits which people are going to derive by environmental improvement should definitely be more than the cost which is engaged in implementing or designing that policy. Then only we say that the policy is cost effective. Now, if the programs are not cost effective, then policymakers may set less restrictive targets in terms of desired amounts of emission reductions. We will see this diagrammatically what we intend to say. What we have said is that if a policy is not cost effective, then it may so happen that the policymakers will set the emission targets which are less than what is desired. Now, if we see this particular figure, what is happening is we are taking emissions of SO2 on the x-axis and the savings in monetary terms on the y-axis, or the cost on the y-axis. As and as the emissions of SO2 is increasing, the marginal damage to the environment is increasing. Therefore, marginal damage curve is upward sloping. Now, if a policy is being designed to check this marginal damage, we can have, for example, two types of abatement cost curves. One is MC1 and other is MC2. Now, if you see, we say a policy is cost effective when there is an equality between the abatement cost and the marginal damage which it is causing. So, this means in this case, we can get 2 points of emissions targets. One, where MD becomes equal to MSE1. So, this becomes, let us say, point A with emissions of A1. Another is where the marginal damage becomes equal to marginal abatement cost 2. Let us say this is point B, where MSC2 becomes equal to MD, and it is at the emission levels of A2. Now, what we are trying to say is, if the policy is cost ineffective, that is, if it is considering MSC1, which is a higher cost curve as the policy curve, then the limit of emissions is also higher at A1. So, this would mean that a cost ineffective policy, the perceived marginal abatement cost is higher than labeled compared to a cost effective policy MSC2, where the emissions are lower. So, if a policy which is cost ineffective is implemented, in our example, if it is MSC1, then what will be the level of emissions which the policy makers will allow? They will allow A1, and definitely A1 is greater than A2. This means that with a cost ineffective policy, the policy makers have allowed higher level of emissions, which would otherwise with the cost effective policy would have been lesser. So, cost effective policy is very important to understand the level of emissions which need to be emitted in the environment. Now, let us take a small case study of cost effectiveness. Let us take the example of ban on single-use plastics. Now, let us do an evaluation. First, we will see what is the direct cost which is associated with the single-use plastic ban. Then, we will see the indirect costs which are associated with this single-use plastic ban. What will be the direct cost? The direct cost will include, one will be the implementation cost, that is the cost of enforcing this ban, the cost of including the monitoring this ban, and the penalties for non-compliance of this particular policy. So, that is one type of direct cost. The other is the substitution cost. The substitution cost is the cost which businesses as well as the consumers are going to incur because they are going to substitute from the single-use plastic to, let us say, biodegradable plastics or paper bags. So, the direct cost will include implementation cost as well as the substitution cost. The indirect cost will be the economic impact. Why? Because it might lead to potential job losses in the plastic manufacturing sector, because these single-use plastics are no more allowed, hence production will be banned. People who were working or the factors of production who were employed in plastic manufacturing sector producing single-use plastic, they will be losing their jobs. So, direct cost and indirect cost are the costs which are going to be associated with the policy of a single-use plastic ban. Another indirect cost will be the consumer cost, which will be higher prices for the alternate products. For example, when single-use plastic bans are banned, if we go for shopping in some supermarket, we might have to buy paper bags, or if we don't buy, many a times the producers pass on the cost of that alternative bag in our product cost. So, the consumer cost is also an indirect cost. So, both the cost, direct and indirect cost, have to be understood when we are talking about the policy of ban of single-use plastics. Now, let us see what are the benefits associated with this policy. One, of course, will be the environmental benefits, because it will reduce plastic waste. It will reduce the wastage which generally goes back in the rivers, oceans, and which, of course, will be less harm to the wildlife. Public health will also be will improve, because there will be a lower incidence of disease associated with plastic pollution, for example, respiratory issues and water contamination. Economic savings in long run will be there, because waste management will reduce, because the rest of the products will be biodegradable, and the cleanup cost will also be less. Now, what will we do in cost effectiveness? We will compare the benefits, which monetary benefits. In these benefits, we will find the monetary value. We'll compare the cost and benefits and get the net benefits. That is, we'll subtract the cost, that is direct cost and indirect cost, from the total benefits to understand whether this policy is cost effective or not. If the answer is positive, we will say that there is a cost effectiveness. The third type of criteria which is used to know whether the environmental policy is, whether it is going to be achieving its objectives or not, is fairness. So, after efficiency and cost effectiveness, we are now coming to fairness. Now, fairness criterion for evaluating environment policy is justifiable on the principle of equity. Basically, it is concerned with how the benefits and cost of environmental improvements are going to be distributed amongst members of the society. So, if an environmental policy is designed to improve the existing environment, then the benefits of that environmental improvement, who is going to share the benefits, is what we understand in fairness, and that is concerned with the principle of equity. Now, fairness is very important from the standpoint of policy effectiveness, because inequitable policies are not supported enthusiastically in political era. So, if a policy is not fair, then the political will is low to implement that policy. Now, let us understand this fairness by this table which I am showing it to you, where we have taken 4 types of programs. Let us say these are the 4 types of environmental policies or programs which are going to be alternatives programs, which we have to decide whether we have to implement A, B, C, D. So, 4 type of programs are there. For each of these programs, the total cost is the same. So, whether the firm, the government is implementing program A, B, C or D, the total cost of all the 4 programs is the same. So, we are showing it as 50. But there is a difference in the total benefits. When we see A and B, the total benefits are 100, whereas in case of C and D policy, the total benefits are 140. What we are trying to know is whether the policy is fair or not. So, let us first understand by way of cost effectiveness whether the cost which is going to be incurred in designing and implementing this policy, what is the cost and what are the benefits. That we get by subtracting total benefits from the total cost. So, we get a column of net benefits, which is basically total benefits minus total cost. So, 100 minus 50 will give you 50 in case of A and B, and 140 minus 50 will give you 90 in case of C and D. So, it appears that the policy is cost effective because the improvement, the net benefits are positive for all the programs. Now, we want to evaluate this policy whether it is fair or not, whether it is giving, how the distribution gains are going to be there amongst, let us say, 2 groups of people, group X and group Y. So, we have 2 groups X and Y. X is that group which is, let us assume, a lower income group, and group Y is the one which is a higher income group. Now, if we see the distribution of these net benefits among X and Y, in case of program A, there is an equal distribution of the benefits between X and Y. That is, out of the net benefit of 50, 25 is going to be distributed to X, which is lower income group, and Y is going to get 25. However, when we look at policy B, there is a difference in the distribution of these net benefits. Program B is giving greater benefits to the lower income compared to higher income group Y. So X is going to get a benefit of 30, whereas Y is going to get a benefit of 20. Now, if there is a choice to implement A or B, the principle of equity, we say X, which are generally the lower income and marginalized, who generally bear more brunt of the environmental degradation, for them, policy B is a better policy because they will gain more by this environmental improvement brought by program B. Now, let us compare C. Now, what has happened in program C? That the net benefits have gone up from 50 to 90. And this 90 is going to be distributed in a very different fashion between X and Y. Who is getting a greater benefit? In case of program C, it is the higher income which is getting a greater benefit compared to the lower income group X. So definitely, even though the net benefits of C are more than the net benefits of B, but in this case, when it comes a question of fairness in criteria evaluation, we will say that B policy is more fair because it is giving greater distribution benefits to lower income compared to C, where the distributional benefits are accruing majorly with the higher income group. So definitely, even though the net benefits from C are more, but on the principle of fairness, it is B which is going to take the cake. Now, let us see what is going to happen with program D. Program D is also giving a net benefit of 90, and here the proportional gain of Y is more than C, but relatively D is sharing greater benefits with X compared to C. So, if we are comparing C and D, we will definitely say, even though in absolute terms, Y is getting a greater benefit of this program, but compared to C, at least the distribution to X has doubled. So, between C and D, probably D will be a better policy. So, this similar situation, we can extend it to the regional analysis also, where probably we can say group Y is let us say an industrialized region and group X is less industrialized region. So, how an environmental policy will have an impact on both the regions, that can be studied. The next criteria for the evaluation of environmental policy is enforceability. Enforceability is, of course, a key criterion for evaluating, because if policies are made but they are not enforced, that policy carries no meaning. What does enforceability refer to? Enforceability refers to the ease and practicality with which a policy can be implemented and compliance can be monitored and ensured. A policy may be very good, but if the policy cannot be implemented easily in practicality, if it is difficult to practically take it to the ground, then it is not enforceable. So, we are not going to get the desired results. Basically, it assesses the practicality of implementing and enforcing a policy effectively. Now, there are two main steps in enforcement. When we are saying that we have to see whether a policy is practically possible or not on the ground, there are two main steps in enforcement. One, you have to monitor it. Other, you might have to sanction. What is monitoring? Monitoring refers to measuring the performance of polluters in comparison to whatever requirements are set out in the relevant law. For example, we have taken the case study of a single-use plastic ban. Monitoring would mean whether actually there is a complete stoppage on single-use plastic or not, or still people are using those plastic bans. So how far, what has been the performance of polluters in comparison to what was required from them to be done as per law is called as monitoring. The main objective of monitoring is to make no polluters that they have to abide by law. So if monitoring is there, then only the polluters will know that there is someone who's watching them, and then they will abide by the law. Otherwise, as we know, it is in human nature to evade something. So polluters will try to evade this monitoring by adopting many ways. Then technology like satellite imagery can help to ease the process of monitoring. So many times it is not possible to go everywhere physically. At that time, with the use of technology, by satellite imaging, by remote sensing, many a times this enforceability is monitored. Another important aspect of enforceability is sanctioning. What is sanctioning? Sanctioning refers to the task of bringing to justice to those whom monitoring has shown to be in violation of the law. For example, we have monitored and we have come to know that there are people who are, even after giving them repeated warnings, they are not following law. So then penalizing them by maybe imposing fines on them for violation of this law is what we call as sanctioning. However, there is a lot of paradox in the sanctioning process. We feel, it is generally felt that if the fines are very large, then automatically it will deter people to follow the law. However, higher fines do not deter violations, because many a times courts are hesitant to import very heavy fines because it results in significant job losses. So many a times, even though the cost of violating the law is very high, and if it is felt, if we do that, we will be able to tackle the problem of enforceability. But a very high fines, they become very difficult to impose practically, because it might lead to significant economic as well as social losses. The next criteria that we will be talking about, which is used to evaluate an environmental policy, is flexibility. Flexibility in environment policy refers to the capacity of the policy to accommodate changes and allow for modification in response to new data, technological advancements, shifts in public opinion, or emerging environmental challenges. A policy which is rigid would mean that we are not able to incorporate the dynamics which are happening around us. So if there is a change in public opinion, if new data is emerged, if there is a technological advancement and we are unable to introduce that or implement it or accommodate it in the policy, environmental policy, the policy will not be flexible. A cap and trade plan, for example, may be efficient at first. We all have studied this cap and trade plan. That is, you are allowed to emit after a particular level, but after that, if you want to emit, then you have to buy certain emission targets. So a cap and trade plan may be efficient at first, but not over time, if this cap cannot be adjusted to underlying changing conditions. The next criteria which we will be talking about is incentives for technological innovations. That is, policy is such which is incentivizing technological innovations. The decision of the private parties, consumers, largely determines the extent of environmental impacts, because ultimately it is the economic activity which is leading to the deterioration in the environment. So what is the behavior of the consumers, what is the behavior of the producers, largely determines the extent of the environment impact. Now, if what will happen if these parties are given incentives, that it will reduce the environment damage extensively. So if incentives are given to them, then it is felt that they will reduce this environmental damage. So whether the policy is providing that incentive to adopt technological improvements to reduce environmental impact is one of an important criteria. For example, we see these days that government is giving a lot of incentive to install solar panels, renewable energy. So if it is a part of a policy that technological advancement is allowing people by incentivizing them to have solar panels and which is reducing their electricity cost, or government is buying those units which are generated on the solar panels, definitely government is incentivizing people, they're incentivizing households, they're incentivizing firms to reduce their carbon footprints. And these technological innovations, if they get built up in the environmental policy, it becomes more effective. Improved technology, as we know, can push the marginal abatement cost downwards. And if a particular environmental policy contains incentive for polluters to seek better ways of reducing pollution, then that qualifies in this criteria. For example, rainwater harvesting, or if already when they are setting up a unit, they have certain pollution control equipments, or they are using certain green technologies, they are using more of renewable resources. So if gets built in the technology, in the environmental policy, definitely incentivizes polluters to find better way of doing things. However, the challenge is the development and widespread adoption of these pollution control technology is a very complex socio-economic process, because generally it is seen that the new technology is expensive and it is the upper income group which first takes the benefit of that improved technology. So, because they can afford that technology. So, the distribution gains in this case becomes very inequitable. So that is a very socio-economic challenging process. So inventions in pollution control are in the nature of public goods, and also the private markets will normally undersupply them, because we know that pollution control or environmental goods are basically public goods. So if there is an invention which is controlling pollution, then what is going to happen is there's a problem of free rider. I may not be willing to pay, I have not paid, but still I will take the benefit of technology because that pollution is been controlled in that area. So that becomes a little challenge in implementation of technological innovations. Then the last consideration or the last criteria for environment policy evaluation are the moral considerations. Now, different people have different kind of opinion to look at policy. For example, the question of choosing between effluent taxes and effluent subsidies. Taxes is you are increasing, you're putting a burden. Subsidies is you are incentivizing them by reduction in prices. Now, that is a question which happens. For example, from the standpoint of effectiveness, subsidies would be better because polluters might very well respond quicker. If I'm subsidizing you, if I'm telling you, okay, you have this pollution control equipment installed in your industrial unit, and I'm going to give you some subsidy for installing that pollution control equipment, definitely there will be a greater willingness to adopt it. So polluters are very quick in responding to this, and there will be a greater willingness for this subsidy program. However, the problem is of ethical action, that we are saying that the people who are causing pollution, we are rewarding them for stopping it. So those moral considerations are always a part of this environmental policy evaluation. So let us do a quick recap of what we did in this lecture. We said that there are various criteria that are very useful in evaluating environmental policies in different circumstances. These are efficiency, cost effectiveness, fairness, enforceability, flexibility, incentive for technological innovations, and moral consideration. Learners, I would request you people to pick up environmental policy of India and try to see that how, to what extent it fits into these criteria and where it does not fit, so that you can do a critical analysis of that policy. So till then, happy learning.